I Am Big is about sharing what's working in a big way. Our guest today is a powerhouse of support. Jenna was diagnosed with a rare form of blood cancer at the age of 29. When she finished treatment, she wanted to give back to the community in a meaningful way. Find out how Jenna has made a big impact in the world. It is our honor to welcome Jenna to the I Am Big Show. Welcome to the I Am Big Show, Jenna. Very, very nice to have you. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
Really, it's an honor. It's a pleasure to have you. I see you've chosen water as your
Yes.
big drink.
Oh,
Let's
yes.
have a
Cheers.
sip. Cheers to everything you're doing. Why water?
Why water? It's just so simple and easy, and it tastes good. I was never a big water drinker, but now it's kind of my go-to drink. I've kind of simplified everything in my life in a lot of ways.
What you have, it's very hard for me to, through 10 minutes of a show, share with our viewers what you have done and the experience you have gone through and created for yourself and then have created for others as well. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about, so at 29, one sudden day you were diagnosed with a form of cancer, and I know it's rare, but I would let you talk about what happened.
Yeah, so, it was December 20th, 2010. I was 29. I was otherwise healthy. I was working out regularly 4 days a week, I would say, keeping a really healthy diet.
You're beautiful, by the way.
Thank you.
You're
So
beautiful,
are
by the way.
you. So are
Thank
you.
Thank you.
So, for months leading up to the date when I was officially diagnosed, I did notice some changes in my body. I was losing weight, which I thought was the result of a healthier lifestyle. But then I started having flu-like symptoms, and the symptoms started increasing. So initially it was once every couple of months, and then it started increasing to the point where it was every couple of weeks I was going back to the doctor and saying, I'm really feeling crummy, I'm feverish, I've got chills, and I couldn't sleep enough. And I'm not a big sleeper. I've never been one of these people that sleep 10 hours a night. I'm more of a 6-7 hour a night kind of girl. And all of a sudden I'm sleeping 12 hours a day, and I'm still exhausted, and I'm getting back from work and I'm sleeping more. And I knew there was something wrong, and I kept advocating for myself. I kept going back to the doctor and saying, this is not right.
Right. Because you just knew.
I knew. And I really, you know your own body better
Yep.
than anyone else. And, so I kept kind of pushing them. And finally, I started having some strange blood work that was coming up, and they were watching me, and they said, your liver levels are a little weird. Why don't we keep you from not drinking for 2 weeks, which wasn't a big issue for me because I've never been a huge drinker. But, so I just cut it out. It was around the holidays, and I ended up going to the gym, and I knew that I was going to pay for it the next day. I thought I'd lifted a weight improperly. And the next day, sure enough, I woke up with what I thought was muscle pain, and I went and got a massage, and it resolved temporarily for like an hour, and then all
Massages
of a sudden,
are quick fixes.
yes, quick fixes,
Quick fix.
but when you've got a tumor growing in your chest, that's a massage is not going to do very much. So, an hour later, it went from being muscle pain to all of a sudden it became difficult to breathe, and I became quite terrified at that point. I knew that there was something really wrong, and so went to the orthopedist that I had seen 6 months earlier for nerve pain, and she said, you're presenting with similar symptoms, but we got to do an MRI just to make sure that, we're targeting the therapy appropriately. And, when I saw her, I came back the next day, she called me in, and I knew it wasn't good when you get a phone call at like 7 in the morning saying you have to come back in to see us. So she called me back in, I met with her, and she said there was a mass in my chest, and I said, so I have cancer? And she said, we don't know for sure, but we're going to have you go and get an emergency CT scan, and we're going to have to get a better picture of what's going on. So I went back in, and I made sure that, while we were waiting for the results, I was close to home, because I knew that I didn't want to have that news alone, and I knew that I needed to be near my parents and the people that I love.
Support, absolutely. Yeah.
And that was sort of the beginning of a crazy journey, you know. So later that day, I was told over dinner that I had cancer, and it was my primary care physician that told me. And I was in such a state of denial that I don't think I heard her properly. And I said, "Oh, that's great news." And she's like, "I don't think you've heard what I said." And I had to have her continue to repeat it because it was just not a part of my narrative, not a part of the plan. But, you know, so that happened, and I came home. I collapsed in the restaurant and then out in the parking lot. And it was a real sort of out-of-body experience because you just feel like everything is changing and you can't control it. So I went back to my parents and I told her I can't deliver this news to my parents. So I asked her to do it. And I came in and my parents were completely white, sheet white, like they had seen a ghost. And we sat and we cried. And we cried for a long time, and then we got drunk. That's what we did. I've never done that with my parents, but I'm telling you, it was necessary. We just sat and we got in our PJs and we drank wine together and watched the snow and kind of just stared into space, not knowing which way was up. And it was the beginning of a journey that has continued since then.
I cannot even begin to imagine the experience of, I'm trying to relate obviously to the fact that sometimes some news, just good or bad, it's news, you can get into that space that easily, right? But when you did get into that space, how did it impact your life? You know, when you are like, now I have cancer. How does that impact your life?
Well, in retrospect, I think I don't know if there's a graceful way of handling the news like this. I think to me it seems so crazy. So the way that it felt like an out-of-body experience for me to go through hearing those 3 words, "you have cancer," I needed to get it out as quickly as possible. So I sent text messages to my closest friends, and then I sent an email to my inner circle. And, you know, immediately I received this outpouring of love. It was almost instantaneous, but it was exhausting to have to tell people over and over again news that is so difficult to tell and news that I had not fully gotten my head around. I mean, I really hadn't. But at the same time, where, you know, I felt this need to sort of express it, I also knew that night that I needed to chronicle what I was experiencing because it was too much for me to handle on my own. And I immediately retreated into writing. In this circumstance, I knew that I had to write. It was therapeutic. And I did it that night, and I started a blog the next day, and I knew nothing about blogging. I mean, it was...
And you were still with your parents at that time?
Yeah, I was at my parents'. I mean, I pretty much, for all intensive purposes, moved into my parents' home. The writing for me was my coping mechanism. It was my sort of space where I was able to process everything that was happening.
What motivated you, other than just being able to express yourself? Something somewhere happened, right, which said, I'm going to do something with this experience.
Yeah.
And what was it?
I think I was so desperate to find meaning in what I was experiencing because it was so crazy to be so young and to be so sick. So I sort of made it like a project. Like in some ways, I felt like I was preparing for this experience my whole life. Like I dealt with cancer the way I dealt with final exams in college and in graduate school. It was like binders and highlights, and it was just this huge undertaking. It was a project. Yeah. And I felt that because I had this rare cancer and because I was so young and because, you know, I had created an audience through my writing, that there had to be some bigger purpose. Yeah. There had to, and I believed that inherently. And I didn't know what was going to come out of it, but I really felt in some ways that this was meant to happen. And so even when I was, you know, completely bald and emaciated and just in the lowest state, you know, the lowest place that I had ever been, like, I knew that there was meaning in feeling that way. I really did. And if there was a way for me to be able to show people what I was experiencing, and if people were somehow able to take something away from it, then it gave me a purpose in what I was experiencing. So, you know, initially it was just an update. My blog was just an update for family and friends. And then I realized, okay, the people that I included and gave them passwords to my blog, there were more people that wanted to know about it. So I figured I'll just open it up. I'll make it public. I just won't advertise it. And whoever wants to stay updated will stay updated. I didn't know anything about blogging, but then I started learning about statistics, and you could see who was reading, and I wanted to see, like, are my friends in Canada, where I lived for 7 years, are they sort of staying up to date? And I was curious, and all of a sudden I realized I had a really large viewership, and I was shocked. I mean, it was like any time I would post something, I was getting thousands of hits from all over the world, and it was in some ways
surprising, but it's not.
But for me, it was. Yeah, who wants to know about this? You know, what strangers want to know about this? You know, family and friends, I understand, but it was interesting. And so then, when I realized that I had all these people reading, on the one hand, it was incredibly supportive, but on the other hand, it was even further isolating, because I realized I was exposing a lot of myself. I was giving a lot of myself in my writing. I was receiving a lot in return, but I was exposed. And so in some ways, while I felt supported, I also felt further isolated. And I wondered, who's reading? Who's a part of this? Who's cheering me on? Who are on the sidelines? And so...
who's behind the typing?
Right. Yeah. And so, you know, in my third round of treatment, where things started really getting really difficult, just emotionally. I mean, physically it was challenging, but you have no immune system, so you can't go outside and you can't be around people. And for me, I've always been really personable, and I've always loved being around people. And it was the hardest part to not be around people I really cared about, not be able to go and do the things that I love to do. So, you know, I got home from the hospital, and it was on one of the days where I was back in my apartment trying to feel normal again. And I decided to just put out a challenge, and I put on Chubby Checkers the twist, and in retrospect now I know why I did it, but like then I just thought, okay, I can't do the Running Man, that's going to exhaust me. I can't do the Roger Rabbit, it's going to look ridiculous, and I don't have the energy. So I thought, what can I do? So I went like this, and I thought, okay, I can do that. Like that I have the energy to do, I have the strength to do, and maybe people will join me on the dance floor and do it. And then I can see who's doing it, who's a part of this. I did not think this through, and I was heavily medicated at the time when I did it, I will admit. And in looking at that video now, my balance was so off. If you actually listen carefully on the video, you can hear I've knocked over a lamp while I've done it. I mean, literally, my balance, it was slightly ridiculous. But it was short, it was simple, and it was directed, and it was a call to action. And I didn't realize it at the time, like how powerful that was. It was what I needed to be able to go back to the hospital again, to be able to go back and put my body through hell again, you know? And I didn't think that I was going to get all of these responses, but I had people all over the world. I mean, well, now we've had over 30,000 people twist out cancer, but at the time, I mean, people were bringing me into their weddings and into their bar mitzvahs and into their office space, and it was all parts of the globe were twisting, and it was amazing. And it became really a metaphor for me of how I dealt with the disease and how I'm choosing to live. And, you know, I twisted out cancer, and I'm continuing to do it.
It's amazing. Let's take a moment to just admire you. And we have to. I mean, what you've done is admirable. The twist has twisted out cancer, I am sure, for many more people than just yourself.
I hope so.
And I think that when a human being is able to take their own experience and create or help other people have more empowered stories, that's an empowered life. And I think this is just the beginning. Twist Out Cancer, it's reach to not only people going through treatment, which is, I think, very difficult, but also to supporters, to survivors, right?
Initially, when this all started, it came from, okay, I finished treatment. I raised a lot of money for the Leukemia Lymphoma Society when I finished. I trained for a half marathon, and, you know, after I did that, it felt really rewarding, but it wasn't enough for me. And so I knew that I needed to do something more. And that's when Twist came about, and we built, you know, a nonprofit out of it. And, you know, it started as I need to focus on the survivors, anyone that's heard those 3 words, and deal with the feelings of isolation and loneliness that accompany a diagnosis, because it's not being talked about. There's not enough psychosocial support going on, and there's not enough sort of hope that's being talked about and experienced necessarily with survivors. It was such a big part of my journey, is holding on to hope, even if there were no statistics supporting it.
So how would you describe what Twist Out Cancer really is?
So Twist Out Cancer is a support community with a twist. So it's a web-based community primarily, where survivors share their twist on cancer, lessons learned, new perspective, fighting strategies, whatever it is that they feel like is important to share. And it's done in a very concise way. It's almost like a soundbite. We don't want to know people's entire narratives because it's so hard to sum up what you've experienced. But what is the big takeaway? What do you want people to know about what you're experiencing or have experienced? And then we ask survivors to put out what we say is a call to action. So something that's meaningful to them in their fight, in their struggle, in their dance, in their journey, however it is that they want to describe it. And then it gives supporters a space to actually respond. And it's creative, and it's engaging, and it's all about community. It's fun. I agree. I agree. It's fun.
Where are you going next?
You know, it's been such an organic process, right? So when I was alone in my room doing the twist, I never thought, okay, we're going to get 30,000 people twisting. It wasn't ever my intention. But my hope is to be able to help as many people as possible, and to engage in thinking about cancer and talking about cancer in a different way. So for me, like, I look at my work is now so meaningful. What I'm doing it feels like it's what I'm supposed to be doing. And so I'd love to get more people involved. I'd love to be able to help more survivors and supporters. So getting our website, continuing, having people engaging in that. But we also have this great event in April happening called Brushes with Cancer. And it's pairing artists up with survivors, and their twists on cancer are being used as the inspiration to create artwork. And so, you know, I think we're going to be continuing to do events like that, where it's almost like an extension of the website. The website serves its purpose in the sense that there are people that are isolated or hospitalized that can't be outside, where this is like their primary form of communicating with the world. But for people that are able to be out in public and that want to engage with survivors, we're trying to create as many, you know, in-person opportunities to do so. So my hope is that we'll be able to sort of get more people involved across the world and engaged in it and talking about it.
Do you realize what you're doing and what you've done? I mean, have you, because, you know, once you start getting into this thing of talking to people, and do you really realize that you are a movement?
That is really sweet.
You are. How many people can start what you have from a place of not being in the best place in their lives, but creating space where others can experience the best they can be at that moment in their lives? That is just unbelievable. That's what you have done.
Thank you so much.
That's what makes it powerful. So any remarkness in your life is not a surprise to me. And this is just the beginning. I encourage our viewers to visit Jenna's beautiful website at twistoutcancer.org, and also visit our website at imbigshow.com and check out some of the resources we have together put there for you, which will help you with different situations you're going through in life. So please check that out. Thank you.